to New Zealand to do my PhD in sciences. I started that in 2010 and I finished just last year. Currently I'm doing some research assistant work here at the University of Otago. I've been studying dolphins for quite a long time now, about 12 years. And that interest started long ago when I was a child. My grandparents had a farm, so I was very interested in the farm animals and seeing how they behave, how they grew, how things worked in the nature. And when I was at school, one day my teacher, science teacher, took us to an exhibition that they were showing skeletons of dolphins and whales that lived in the southern part of Brazil, where I'm from. And from that moment on, I knew that was I wanted to do for my life. I came to New Zealand because I wanted to work with Ewan Fordyce, who was my primary supervisor for my PhD. I knew him from papers that I have read, from books, and I had a colleague that spent 9 months here working with Ewan, and he told me that he was a very nice guy and he was looking for more students, and he quite enjoyed the way South Americans worked. Diligent workers, relaxed, fun to deal with, so he was looking for another South American student, and I was looking for an opportunity of a PhD, and everything happened at the same time, like one of those magic moments. And somehow, I always tell this story, but I always knew that I would end up in New Zealand. I don't know how, but I had this feeling long back. One day I watched a lecture about New Zealand and I just knew that I would end up being here, and then it just ended up that there was an opportunity for a scholarship and Ewan was looking for a South American student, and everything happened. But I know that I think that path in my life was already there. So in my previous work in Brazil, I was studying dolphins and fossils and sea lions and so on, and I was specifically interested in studying their teeth. You think it's such an odd thing to study, but if you had to choose a single part of a skeleton of an animal to tell you a bunch of information about how that animal lives, how it interacts with the environment, how old it is and so on, you choose teeth. Is the best way to go. And they are quite hard and quite tough. We know by our teeth that they are very hard structures, so they preserve quite nicely in the fossil record. So I came to New Zealand to do my PhD in paleontology. That's a science that studies how animals change over time. Study specifically fossils, the records of old animals that preserved on rocks, and we study how they change over time to be how they are nowadays. And I was studying how the teeth of dolphins have changed through time, because if you think about this group, they started as terrestrial animals, so they lived on land, and they were adapting more and more to live in the water. And among the changes that they had in their bodies, some of the big changes that they had was in the structure and the number of their teeth. So if you look at the skull of a dolphin, this one is the Hector's dolphin. It's a species that you only find here in New Zealand and is quite threatened by entanglement in fishing nets and so on. It's quite one of the smallest dolphins in the world. That's the skull, so that's the head, and that's very odd for a mammal to have this shape of teeth, so I wanted to understand why, and that's why I came to New Zealand to look at the fossils and see how this transition happened. And I think studying teeth is great because most marine mammal scientists haven't studied them. Normally you study teeth to look at the age, but that was all. So you can tell how old an animal is by looking at their teeth. But I wanted to look further, I wanted to look at other things, and it was quite important that part of my PhD was done at the dental school. So I was, my co-supervisor, Jules Kieser, he was a dentist and an anatomist, and bringing this knowledge from dentistry was very important, and for me it was a great experience to have fields that never worked together, like marine mammalogy and dentistry. So they were very excited to help and with the results of the study. This is another fossil block of rock collected here in North Otago in New Zealand, and you see the jacket was open, and the technicians are doing a very skilled and very patient work of preparing, scraping the rock to show what is here. And this is a very important one. It's very nice to see here. That's the top of the skull of a dolphin. We think it's of a similar kind of one of these. So this is just a cast, so it's a replica of a real dolphin from New Zealand as well. And we think it's something similar to these ones. And they had this really awkward, you see those are teeth, so teeth pointing forwards like this. This is very strange. We don't know what they use these teeth for, obviously not for eating. This is very exciting because you have the skull, which is the most important part. You have plenty of teeth. You see these long teeth here. You have vertebrae. Here's the lower jaw. From North Otago and South Canterbury is a region called Waitaki Valley, specifically a place called Hecataramia Valley. So it's one of the most important fossil localities in the world for whales and dolphins. So I did a degree in biological sciences in Brazil, in the Federal University of Santa Catarina, the state I was born. And after that, I did a master's in zoology in the Federal University of Paraná. After that, I worked for a year. I was working as a science and biology teacher, so I have a major in biology teaching. And so in 2005, I was in my last year at uni, and I took a break here. And I went to work and do some research in the Brazilian Amazon, and that was really life-changing experience for myself as a young biologist and as a person, really. So I went there because in that area they were developing a model of sustainable research to see if that hunting was sustainable, if the crops were not removing much of the native forest and so on. So everything was quite well studied. And I was working in the project at aquatic mammals. So I was studying river dolphins. There's two species in the Brazilian Amazon, the tucuxi and the pink river dolphin, or boto, which is a bit of a famous species. And I was also working with manatees, and there was an issue that manatees, people quite enjoy hunting and eating them. So manatee hunters, they were like quite high ranked in the society. They were seen as very skilled and really knowledgeable people. And the manatee meat was considered a very nice meat, and they got lots of fat out of it. So it was quite important as well, because they used the fat to preserve meat of other animals. So we're talking about the middle of the Amazon, so there is no electricity, no fridges, no supermarkets, nothing like that. So I went to work with the locals to do some environmental education, learning about their perceptions about manatees and dolphins, and learning a bit of their hunting practices, and working especially with school kids in terms of changing their perceptions and try to educate them about hunting. And it was interesting that I got there with one mentality and I left there with completely changed idea. They're thinking, oh, hunting manatee is wrong and you have to stop doing that. And after living with them, I pretty much lived with the communities. Well, we had our base that we went to sleep and so on, but I spent my whole days talking to people, having coffees with them and having local food, which was really great. So after a while I see how that was important for them and part of their culture, and I had no problems whatsoever with them hunting manatees, unless, of course, if we knew that that was not threatening the species. So I think this tradition should really maintain if we know that we're not threatening the species. And the knowledge that the hunters and the local peoples had about these animals was just amazing, really impressive. I felt like I was like the most educated person there, and I didn't know a thing about the animals, and those people, they were pure biologists in their own way, just by living and seeing that thing every day.
In my dreams I'm dying all the time. Then I wake, it's kaleidoscopic mind.
So it's very interesting here in New Zealand that you have the native population, the locals, which are known as Maori, but there are 25 different tribes of Maori people in this country, and I think they are really knowledgeable people that have been living here for much longer than the Europeans, and they know a lot about the environment and so on, similar to the natives in the Amazon. And they also have a very interesting relationship with dolphins and whales and seals and sea lions, because for them, I think that's quite beautiful. They think in their belief system that dolphins and whales are just like our mirror image in living in the water. So for them, it's just like a person living inside the water. So there's a few occasions where we had strandings. So when an animal died and it ended up stranding in a beach somewhere, we want to get the skeletons and study about the muscles and so on. So if we know what's happening with the modern ones, then we can learn about the fossils better. So we've been to quite a few strandings, and it's quite interesting that normally the first people that will get there, and they have quite a strong role in the whole thing, are the local Maori, and they will treat that occasion very respectfully, as a person has died, for example. So there was a few occasions where we were not allowed to work, or that we were allowed to work provided that we brought the remains back to the site. So for us it was interesting that we could learn, but we never got to keep the skeleton, and that was a very rare species. There was maybe 10 in the whole country, so it was a big opportunity. But at that point, the people involved were not happy for that to happen, and so we respected that. But in most cases, the local communities, the iwi, they are really supportive. They go with you in the field and they want to learn and help. And has been a great experience because they're really positive and involved, and Maori culture resembles a lot for me South American culture, because it's all about family, food, and treating people well. So I had great experience working with the local communities in New Zealand, and for me it's fascinating this respect that they have about the animals. There was a case, very beautiful story. A guy, he went swimming and he died. And a few days after he died, there was a stranding of a dolphin. I think it was a pilot whale, I don't remember the species. So it was very moving, very interesting that for the family of that person, that was him. He came back as a dolphin. And of course, in that situation, no scientist could do anything, because we're dealing with a family member of the local iwi. It really takes, I think, a long road, and it's really interesting when you have this perception that for other people, this animal may mean other things. Last Wednesday, the 17th of September, we had a very exciting stranding happening here in Dunedin. It's a species that's not very common. It's a species of porpoise. The species name is Phocina dioptrica. And these guys are mostly known from southern South America, from Tierra del Fuego and Patagonia region. And they live in between southern South America and New Zealand and southern Australia, so they're like subantarctic species. So they're very rare and difficult to find. So there's about, I think, less than 10 specimens known for New Zealand in like 150 years of that people have been collecting dolphins and whales in New Zealand. So it's quite a special stranding. So we worked on that specimen. We took measurements, lots of photographs, and we dissected the animal, and we found out that it had a broken lower jaw and also broke the hyoid bones that hold the tongue. And because of that, most likely then the animal drowned. We found lots of water and material inside the lungs showing that the animal drowned. But what caused that impact to the side, we still don't know. We don't think it's a ship or a boat, because then the damage would be bigger, we think. So a hypothesis is maybe aggression between cetacean species, so maybe another bigger dolphin. So we are not really sure, but yeah, that was a very exciting opportunity, and for me, I've never seen one of those before, so it's really exciting to increase my list of other species, and it was a great pleasure. And so after finishing my PhD, I did a short postdoc, is what we call for postdoctoral studies, with my co-supervisor in dentistry. And we were looking at expanding the studies we did with dolphins with other animals. And we had the opportunity of studying fur seals and sea lions, for example, studying their teeth. Because similar to dolphins, they also live in the aquatic environment, they feed in water. They eat similar prey like fishes and squid and so on. So we wanted to see if that was influencing how they had their teeth and how the teeth worked and so on. So we did some studies with fur seals and sea lions as well. And we also had an opportunity to do a forensic case with some sharks from an aquarium in Auckland. There was a case of, they discovered some very weird teeth of sharks in the bottom of the aquarium. The teeth were quite rubbery, they were quite not very mineralized and in a different shape from normal teeth. So we studied and compared how they were different from normal teeth, and we're still trying to figure out why that happened. For about 14 years now, on and off a few years. If you think about like how karate started back in Okinawa in Japan hundreds of years ago, it was because people were not allowed to use their weapons and swords and machetes and so on to defend their families and their properties and so on. So they had to develop a way of using their fists and their feet and other weapons to defend themselves. And that's the great thing that karate gives you is this feeling that your life is on the line. And if you have this feeling, then you need to give your best, because if you don't, you may be dead. So I think it's this feeling of persevering, of always trying to do your best. And there's something in karate that we always say is like, you are your biggest enemy. So your mind is your biggest enemy. So if you say I can't, then you won't be able to do it. So it's this constant battle of overcoming yourself of the day before. Like, today I'm a better person than I was yesterday. So this feeling of always improving is what I like about karate and what I try to apply in my life. What I find really interesting about science is this counterbalance between the scientific method and all the rules and observations and your test of hypotheses and how this is all precise, how square and black and white. And at the same time, what really attracts me to science is the humane element in science, how you can captivate, how you can inspire people, how you can collaborate instead of competing. So this humane element, this joy of discovering something and captivating people about your discoveries is what really gets me into science. And I had many important mentors in my life, in my scientific life. First, I would say my first supervisor, Loch, back in Brazil, was someone that really took me by the hand and showed me all the first steps of science. And more recently, my supervisors in my PhD, Ewan Fordyce and Jules Kieser, were really important figures for me. And Jules, especially, he passed away a couple of months ago, and I really miss him a lot. And he showed me quite nicely that being a good person and being a good scientist have to walk hand in hand. And you can do great science, but if you're a jerk, you're not captivating people, you're not transmitting your message, you're not making a difference in the world. So I think I inspire myself in this feeling that you need to be both a good person and a good scientist. And something that I'm really proud of is that this year I met in person one of my greatest, not a mentor because I haven't worked with her, but a really inspiring figure since I was a student many years ago, who is Jane Goodall, who works with the chimpanzees in Gombe, and how it has inspired a whole generation of young scientists, including myself. So meeting her was a big highlight, I think, of my career.